Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I feel very honoured to be representing the southwest of Australia today. So, just to give a bit of a background to me, Angela's touched on a few things there, but essentially, I grew up in the southwest and sort of studied and worked here and gardened and grew up generally. And pretty soon sort of went traveling, as a lot of Australians do, over to Europe, and having sort of family connections. My dad's side is from the UK. My mother's side is also from there, but they've been out in Australia since the sort of 1830s. And so I ended up working in London for a few interesting design practices, and sort of most notably and sort of relevantly to this talk is my sort of time with Tom Stewart-Smith, who's a landscape practice based in London. And I was very fortunate to work with Tom, and we created gardens sort of not only in the UK, but in different parts of Europe, including sort of more temperate areas and in the Mediterranean basin as well, and also did some work in the United States. So I think one of the interesting things about working in these different contexts was the sort of need to sort of distill what is unique about that particular environment, and the climate, the sort of materials, the culture of that place, and hopefully come up with something in terms of a design that is, or a sort of result that is different to what else is happening in that normal sort of area. I've just actually somehow managed to make everyone's screen in front of my slides, and I'll just sort of try to do something there. What I was going to say is, so with this in mind, I was kind of quite interested to work back in the southwest of Australia. And in sort of late 2017, I moved back to Perth and set up practice here. So I guess what I should probably add is that I didn't quite shake the thing of not working in different parts of the world. So I actually still probably undertake about half of our work is overseas in sort of India and in Bali as well. But today, I think what I'd like to talk about in terms of the southwest is just to give a bit of a brief overview of the area, and to also look at the sort of natural environment, as well as touching on sort of European colonisation less than 200 years ago, and then sort of go into some of the challenges facing sustainable gardening here, and then also just sort of look at a few of our sort of projects as well. So as some of you might know, there are two sort of Mediterranean climate zones in Australia, a smaller area around the South Australia and Adelaide, but the more significant one or larger one being the southwest. This part of Australia, this are the traditional lands of the Noongar people, who have sort of lived and managed this landscape for an estimated 50 to 70,000 years. And they are part of the oldest living culture on Earth. And so I'd just like to pay my ongoing respects to their families and elders, past, present, and emerging. The southwest is Australia's only biodiversity hotspot. So we have an incredible sort of variety of life here. Basically, I think we've sort of over 8,000 plant species, 25,000 species of including animals, I believe. And part of this, the reasoning for this is that we're actually a very ancient part of the Earth. So we're one of the oldest surfaces on Earth. I believe it's something like nearly 300 million years of continual evolution without ice ages and much volcanic activity. So what this there are obviously quite a few sort of ecosystems and lands and everything around this part. And I think in our work, we take influence from a lot of these landscapes. So what I'll do is give you a sort of flick through whirlwind tour of some of these landscapes. This is starting on the south coast, and this is the some of the sort of coastal heathlands of that area, and one of the sort of most recognizable species of that is the Hakea victoria, the royal Hakea. And then moving slightly further west from the south, there's the sort of peaks of the Stirling Ranges and the Parongarups. Again, these are some of the highest points, but incredible sort of diversity of life. We have a lot of forests, including jarrah, but then these sort of are the Karri forests, which are the tallest of the trees down here, sort of similar in height to the redwoods of California. All sorts of weird and wonderful things. This is an orchid, of which there are many types. And then coming back up the coast to sort of Perth, where the Swan Coastal Plain is. This is the Bankshire woodlands and sort of wetlands is what it was typically around Perth. These are some of the wetland areas. Coastal sort of limestone, grassy dune environments. This is moving further inland again to the sort of what's called the wheat belt and the gold fields. And you get a lot of these sort of eucalyptus forests and mallees. And then moving sort of further to the northern part of the southwest region, you get these amazing sort of wildflower displays over in the sort of springtime. This is the sort of wreath Leschenoltia on the side of the road. So, as a sort of quick potted history, in 1829, the British, who had been over in the eastern states or in Sydney for nearly 40 years, thought they better set up a colony on this side of Australia. And pretty soon, the sort of natural resources and everything of this part were recognised, and the population started to grow. And I think this could be a whole talk in its own right, but probably the main points are that most of us who live here now are very much sort of beneficiaries of that colonisation, but it has actually had quite a detrimental effect on the natural environment here. There are a lot of land clearance and pollutants and everything. It's amazing in such a short space of time how much this landscape has changed and how much has been lost. However, that is not really something that's just something in the past, and it is happening still at an alarming rate, mainly due to sort of expanding populations and land clearance. So starting to sort of come down into gardening, and I think the visitor to Perth might notice that there's quite a contrast to the average sort of garden and the natural environment around. And this was quite interestingly put by an author called George Seddon in his book The Old Country, and he says, "Australia is the world's driest continent, yet from the time of European settlers arrived, we have surrounded our homes and cities with water-thirsty exotics, replacing the original landscapes that had no need for fertilizers, sprinklers, etc." And this mindset that is very much a sort of imported idea from our sort of colonial beginnings, and sort of the ideas of what a beautiful garden or landscape is, that's sort of coming from the British side of things. This is sort of exemplified by quite a well-known quote from Charles Darwin, who visited Albany in the 1830s on the Beagle. And he says, "We stayed there 8 days, and I do not remember since leaving England having passed a more dull, uninteresting time." he who thinks like me will never wish to walk again in so uninviting a country. So that, I think, is just giving a little hint to what that sort of the way that this landscape was viewed from sort of Northern European eyes. And that in many ways, the bush is this kind of amazingly beautiful space, but in the height of summer and through this a certain lens, it can sort of have a sort of harshness or a wildness to it that maybe people want to tame, or make it easy to be dismissed as scrub. And I think that term scrub is almost quite a detrimental one to the bush, because it is something that allows it to be quite easily dismissed as without value. So that makes it easier for say development or ancient areas of bushland to be cleared without that much fuss from society. So in terms of sort of gardening outlook, I think that also is there's a few paradoxes here, in that we kind of love the idea of a sort of the Mediterranean holiday, but I think in terms of people's gardens, it's quite often people will look towards the lawns of Northern Europe, or particularly the sort of lush foliage of Bali, which is actually our closest holiday destination outside of Perth. One thing about native plants is it's quite often talked about that there's that these are not really suited. I think, and it's true of many species natives, that they are so specifically sort of adapted to their environment that they can be quite unforgiving in a sort of a garden setting. And that is true of a lot of the plants, but with such a large pool of plants, it's too broad a statement. So in our work, we try to include endemic natives. These are a few of the sort of species that are sort of more commonly included in our gardens. These are various banksias, as well as the Ostrastipa elegantissima, which we touched on there, which has these amazing, I think a lot of the year it can look like a sort of a scrappy grass, but it does have these incredible sort of fluffy flowers. The kangaroo paw, Anagasanthus, that is a plant that only comes from this part of the world. And then various, I think, Hakea lyrata has made it out of this part of the world and is used in other areas that might be recognized, and a whole sort of selection of fantastic prostate banksias. And I think in some of that, in some of the more interesting planting that's happening in Perth and planting design, this is part of the Kings Park Botanic Gardens, and this is where they've actually created recreated different sort of environments from the landscape around Western Australia. It is actually a botanic garden solely dedicated to the plants of the southwest, or actually, Western Australia. So I think some of this stuff is actually really quite an interesting sort of collection of plants, and I think is kind of maybe the future of where we're going with planting design. This is another little bit of inspiration, which I sort of quite like. I thought I'd just include a few things from around the area. This is the actually from the Perth Zoo, but it's a recreation and closure of some of the wetlands. But I thought that's very well done. So I've chucked it in there. What is quite interesting, however, is that I think probably from that sort of beginnings, you could sort of say that we only use native plants, but in this sort of colonial sort of background that we have, what is actually quite interesting is that on the shipping routes from UK to Australia or to Perth, they actually passed and stopped in at 2 sort of Mediterranean climate zone areas. So, and with that, I think as well as a lot of plants that were coming out from the UK, I think that very quickly became a thing where the plants that were coming from these particular zones actually survived in the Perth garden. So as well as that natural environment, I'm quite interested in looking at some very old, some of the older sites or abandoned gardens, and sort of seeing which plants I think sort of survive. And I think it's quite an interesting test plot to see what had come out. This is obviously a very large dragon tree in a garden that probably came out from the Canary Islands. Oops, what have I done there? So this again is some sort of some of the older gardens in Perth, which do use a lot of these very tough things. And what's interesting about that is that nowadays there's very much a reliance on irrigation and the prevalence of that, and fertilizers and things. And that was also the case in these previous times, but I think it was less of a sort of industrial scale irrigation. So it's quite an interesting point to come through, particularly Aeoniums. This is the Sontius canariensis in wintertime. Melianthus, which is very well suited to our climate, but very rarely seen as well. And then a lot of the bulbs, the Amaryllis belladonna and the freesias. They, interestingly, a lot of this used to be a very common plant in Perth, but you don't really see that anymore because of the prevalence of irrigation. It doesn't like the summer water. And this is some, with this view of how little water we can get away with. These are sort of various test plots. This is admittedly in wintertime, but some sort of test plots of what survives and what doesn't. This is a view from one of our more forward-thinking nurseries, and this is their part of their planting that they have there, which is gets no summer water. So, looking at a few projects that we do, and a lot of it is what have I done there? Yeah, a lot of our work in the southwest is in sort of suburban areas, and this is a project that is probably about 6 kilometers from the city centre, and it was really an experiment with trying to use as many endemic plants as possible. There are a few plants from other parts of Australia, and I think that's probably leads us into sort of saying that there's a lot of the available natives that you do get in Australia are essentially hybridized or bred, and they might come from different parts of Australia. So that thing of what is a native and endemic versus a native, and quite often we talk about natives or using a native garden, but that actually groups all of Australia together. And as you no doubt know, there's lots of different climates within Australia. So in a lot of our gardens, we actually prefer to look at plants that come from a similar climate around the world, so Mediterranean and more arid climates, rather than necessarily just the something because it's Australian. This garden, however, it was a study in trying to use as many of the endemic species as possible, and it's this is the Anagasanthes labidus, probably a little bit towards the end of its time, late summer, and it was I think it's an interesting experiment in terms of that. This is some of the Juncus grasses. I think there is still, this garden is kind of surrounding a lawn, which was very much at the request of the client who has sort of children, and I think that we have a sort of certain relationship with lawn, or try to minimize it. One of the issues in Perth is that it's such a default sort of reaction to anything that's not hard landscaping becomes lawn. But we try to minimize it as much as possible, but it does sort of have a role in terms of when it's being sort of played on and used. This again is a sort of selection of Juncus and Coverbrotus, the local Coverbrotus, as well as some of those prostate Banksia flexnifolia. The this is probably one of the few non-local, non-endemic local ones, but it's a yeah, the rice in the campus comes from the eastern states. The this is actually the back garden of the same house, and so it was an extension to a sort of 1940s home that was sort of in the family for that time, and so there was quite a lot of sort of nostalgia to that place, and quite a few plants that they wanted to keep, and a lot of this extension was actually built around this old grape. So there was at one point it looked like the lone thing there. So based on that grape, there were some frangipanis, there was some and some larger citrus down the back, sort of 60-year-old citrus. So this is very much more of a study in using sort of Mediterranean, a sort of more recognizable palette of Mediterranean plants, I would say, and a selection of salvias, grasses, some of these aloes. This Opuntia was from an original one on the site, and echiums as well, and it's quite a sort of very much a sort of a small scale garden, but has quite a lot of stuff going on in it. Again, here we are a bit later when that echium's really sort of taken off. One of the other projects I wanted to talk about is probably another sort of plant palette approach again, and this was a garden for actually a sort of Australian and a South African couple, and we kind of use that opportunity to really bring in some of those larger aloes from South Africa and work with grasses, but also having some bigger banksias as well. So it was quite a fun study. This also uses miscanthus grass, which does require a little bit of water here, but there is it doesn't go with the no water palette, but it will actually work with a small amount of water. So this was very much mostly exotic, I would say, but using some of these larger aloes, as well as Leonotus, Gara, the miscanthus, and a whole bunch of other things as well. That is the again with these Anagasanthus being incorporated into that as well. This is a sort of just at that time of year when the grasses are still up and the aloes are coming out, not but in the winter time. So this is another part of that same garden, using some aloes and a whole selection of again some salvias, aloes, a lot of Mediterranean plants that you recognize, and there was also very much a sort of fruiting sort of varieties of trees, so locusts and olives and yeah, a number of others. This is Ruta chalapensis, which works very well, although it has a very strong smell that sort of turns off some clients, but it sort of looks really healthy a lot of the time. And this is Salvia canariensis candissima at the top. This was very much a garden, family with children as well. So there is a sort of smaller area of lawn, but we also. Okay. There we are.
Sorry.
No problem. Yes. So the yeah, again, this was an area for kids. So we actually put in, rather than lose too much planting space, we actually put in these sort of higher level walkways through, sort of suspended over the top of the planting, so that they had sort of this is a way of sort of justifying increasing the areas of planting. Actually, these are sort of little gangplanks for the kids to run through the planting. I've sort of thrown in a few of the construction drawings of this space, just to give you an idea of rather all being sort of finished photos. We did get, this is probably about as big as we would get a Banksia in Australia. This is Banksia integrifolia, which is actually in eastern states Banksia, but for some unknown reason is much more adaptable to growing to a larger size. A lot of our local Banksias will grow, but they'll kind of just die after a certain size in the nursery, so you have to plant them relatively small. Unfortunately, we planted this garden in the middle of summer, so it did take a bit of getting used to, a bit of shock, but it seems to have settled down and be relatively self-sufficient on a very small amount of water now. I thought I would just show these. I think gardening is such a sort of slow process that a lot of those projects were actually ones that happened, you know, some of the first ones when I came back. So there's kind of like a sort of line of projects that come through, and it seems to take a while before you get any photographs of them. This, however, is one that's very much on the drawing board at the moment, and it is kind of probably brings us up to date with our thinking at the moment, and some of the stuff we're doing at the moment. And this is a new house across the road from one of our lakes in Perth. And what we're looking to do is very much take that landscape and some of those endemic plants from across the road and bring that into the front garden, and ideally create a sort of winter wet depression, which means we can grow a lot of more interesting sort of reedy Juncus and various other restiads. And that, I think, we're looking to redirect some of the sort of water from the roofs into that space, and essentially have that as a larger soak well. And then in the rest of the garden, we are essentially having doing some sort of rock work. I'll jump to a sort of 3D view pretty soon, but we're looking to have introduce a natural swimming pool, which is something that's just sort of coming into Western Australia, where you're swimming in fresh water, and using some of the local rock work. So very much a sort of interpretation of this natural environment, which was across the road, and creating this swimming pool, which is more of an architectural element within essentially a sort of more naturalism around it. So that would be largely native on this side, and then on the south side we would have be using sort of a combination of more productive plants, and probably a few more exotics within that. We also have green roofs with this, and that's, if I sort of jump to some of the plant palettes, we're looking to introduce this is the sort of some of the more native and endemic stuff on the ground floor, and then this is sort of a 3D view of that space, with the roof terraces, with these green roofs, which will introduce quite a lot of maybe a few exotics and larger spiky aloes that you wouldn't want to, or agaves that you wouldn't want to get too close to, but look good. And then there are a few sort of internal courtyards, and then on the very top is this roof terrace, which I think will be more of a sort of Mediterranean olives and a grapevine and that sort of thing. So this is sort of early stages of a project, but is kind of gives a bit of an idea of some of those some of that thinking and what we're looking at doing at the moment. And that is the sort of, that is the gist of what I've got to show today.
Okay.
Have I sort of sped through that, or am I sort of,
Yeah,
how's
you did
that for
speed
timing?
through that. That was at top speed, but it was beautiful. I'm going into gallery now. So everybody, if you would like to maybe stop your screen, then we'll all see
yes,
each other. We can...
let's have a look. Let me just work out how to do that. New share, it's saying that.
No, just close.
No.
Close your...
Stop share. There it is. There it is.
There we go. Okay, so we'll unmute everybody, and I'd like to compliment you on that stunning design. Crikey, it's just so clever. The 3D, you know, perspective. It looked fantastic. What a fabulous project! And thank you for your introduction to the history, and obviously pointing out some of the issues that you're grappling with, which I think in many zones we're grappling with. Our historic tastes versus our water availability and new thinking. And not so new thinking. I mean, let's face it, the Mediterranean garden has been on this theme for 25 years. So it's incredible. Even in South Africa, they still talk about colonial style gardens. You know, we've got a long way to go. But thank you for that lovely presentation. Now, normally we have some chat questions that come up, which are curated by Yvonne. And if anybody would like to ask in person a question, you just pop your little yellow hand up, and it puts you up into the top corner, and I can see that you wish to answer a question if anybody wants to speak. Yvonne, is there anything on the chat?
Well, just to start with the comments coming in from North America, Southern Europe, other places I don't know where they are all just saying what wonderful work, and how such brilliant designs, and complimenting you on being able to feature indigenous planting.
Thank you.
So yes, everybody's having a little think about that. Could I just ask a couple of questions whilst I've got you to myself, as it were? And first question, kangaroo paw. I've only been to Western Australia for a very short time once, a few years ago, and it changed my whole attitude to Mediterranean planting. I'm in the Central East, and it completely changed my attitude. The King's Garden, Botanic Garden, it just blew me away. Kangaroo paw, what are the growing conditions it needs, please? I can't find anything definitive.
There are a huge variety of different kangaroo paws, and also probably even more hybrids. It's a very hybridized plant nowadays, and all of those would take different. There's quite a few different conditions that they'd like. I actually quite like using the flavidus one, which is the largest of the species, and that's mainly because it's a much more disease resistant. A lot of them quite often get black spot and some other ones like that. So I tend to stick to the flavidus, but experiment a bit with the others. But it is a very hybridized thing, and I think it might even be in Iran that a lot of them are bred there as well. I think obviously for the florist industry, and I think more West Australian, Southwest Australian plants are sort of bred and grown in the nurseries in Iran than they are here. Amazing.
I didn't know that. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I've never seen kangaroo paw for sale as a garden plant in Europe.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
No, I'm just speaking.
That's
for
true.
myself.
Actually, I'm not sure. I don't. Yeah.
And it's just such an ornamental thing, and of course the texture of the little paws is so attractive. Well, okay, thank you. We'll get on.
That's a
to
wonderful
that.
plant.
We'll try and track them down maybe in Iran. And secondly, could I just ask you what this dismally named, is it winter wet depression? I trying to spell that to anyone?
It is it's not the best. It's not the best wording of it. I didn't make it up.
We've not. We don't do very much in terms of winter rain storage here in Europe, where we should. And on the other hand, I'm very pleased to see that you've started to buy into our idea of swimming ponds, which we're very keen on here.
That's right, and I think that's quite exciting that it's coming here. I think quite often the heat that we have here had been an issue for that in the past, of just it being a little bit too prone to things that you don't want to swim in growing. But that technology is changing and moving on fast. I think largely European and American technology is coming here, so that's kind of quite exciting. But yeah, just going back to the winter wet depression, or the rain garden, I think it's called in the US, and I think it's probably something that is much more prevalent in the US than it is here. But quite a few of our sort of native plants that come from these wetland areas will actually it's quite often a thing that it sort of says, like sort of winter sort of wetness.
But do you let it dry out? You let it dry out completely in summer?
Yes, it would, yeah. And I think we'd look to plant things there that are used to sort of creek beds that would dry out in summertime, and then be getting sort of having sort of wet feet in the wintertime. So we'd kind of try to create a little sort of ecosystem for them there. But essentially, it should be just something that you could walk through in the summertime. That's the idea.
But just wet and depressing in the winter. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I'm going to stop hogging the conversation here because I see that Susan Brooks, who is also in Central Italy, is asking, how easy have you found it to convince people to go native?
It is I think that comes back to that sort of general mentality to it, and it can be a challenge. I think it's quite often the thing where you have either a completely native garden or not, and you do find some surprising attitudes where people sort of say, I hate natives or something like that. I think we try to, if we're not doing a completely native garden, just try to sort of incorporate native plants into our sort of planting scheme. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a completely either or. I think starting to bring those plants in is the way to sort of grow that, and also create something that's kind of more of this place. I think it's quite easy to otherwise, create something that's could be in Italy.
Okay, thank you. The next person is Hannah Gardner, good name, who would be very interested to hear about how you're addressing the carbon footprint of the materials, and also, rainfall capture. You've just been mentioning the winter rain. Is this something that you're pursuing?
I think it is something that is becoming more and more a consciousness within that. I think a lot of the stone and materials that we get here are imported from different parts of the world. So that's not ideal, but there's some of the gardens that we're doing now as well, where we're using some more local materials, bricks and things that come from here. But even that doesn't have the greatest carbon footprint. We are on limestone here, so it's quite a soft limestone, but quite often it's used for sort of blockwork walls. Excuse me, it's not so much used in the way that you would see in the Mediterranean with some of that softer limestone, where it's used for steps and rubble walls and things that kind of romantically sort of fall apart. People aren't quite so into that, but I'm very keen on it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a very depressing confession that I must share with you now, that I live in the region of the Carrara marble mines. And there are various different whole mountains made of local stone and beautiful stuff. And basically what you find when you go there to buy is enormous shipments of Indian marble, stuff from India, because essentially it's to do with the cost. there you can buy a pallet of Indian stuff that's been finished and, you know, already sort of semi-prepared before you even start to look at maybe, you know, 2 pieces of stone. So they're just doing massive business, and you would think that people would really like to have something from their local area, particularly something as iconic as Carrara marble. But no, I mean, it's absolutely. Economics. It's a global.
It's a shame, and I think ultimately that thing of working in different parts of the world, it's much more interesting to use materials that are of that place. Otherwise, you may as well be importing your sort of ideas and your materials from elsewhere. Much more interesting, I find, to try and create something that is using that local material, those local materials.
Now, we're starting to get a flood of advice on kangaroo paw. I'm sorry about it. Now, Jacqueline Potter, who is in France, says that she can buy kangaroo paw there, but they seem to need an awful lot of water, and she's failed miserably there. Whereas Albert Salas in Spain, I think in Alicante, he's done really well, and he was told to water when the blooms start wilting, and that has worked well. So we're starting to home in on an approach here. Okay.
Do we know what type of kangaroo paws they are? No,
they don't say. No. No. I can see Jacqueline's shaking her head. She doesn't know.
No, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's so uncommon here, they probably don't bother to name the variety.
Yeah, it's uncommon. They just don't label them properly in the.
No. Oh, now Albert's just written in to say no, he didn't know what his was either.
Okay.
With a follow-up from Jacqueline, she would like to know whether you get any mosquitoes coming in with these more natural water features.
I think that is a consideration. Yes, there is a sort of constant pump going, essentially, and it's I had a client recently kind of not want to go for one of them because they had sort of heard that the pipe has to the pump has to go the whole time, but I think the guy sort of come back and said, well, it's actually a lower voltage and uses less energy than a traditional swimming pool. So I think there is a sort of constant circulation of the water, which prevents, hopefully, mosquitoes sort of having too much chance.
Would you?
But it's a good question.
Add a little bit to that, because I've got one of these swimming ponds.
Oh yeah, you'd probably know much more.
What we found was that when we first filled it up, of course, mosquitoes said hooray and they all rushed in, but they were followed by a swarm of dragonflies and frogs and newts and lots of other people who just love to eat them. And so we were advised that whatever the level of mosquitoes were in place before we built it, it would not be any worse than that after we got this pond.
Yeah, and you've got that biodiversity of everything in there. Great.
And as you say, the pump, the circulation pump, is less than an ordinary light bulb. It's it just keeps it moving a little bit, and that's all you need.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay,
no, they're great.
Now, and in Southern California, I'm told by Kevin Creed, it's very easy to find kangaroo paw. In fact, it's used everywhere. In fact, almost overused. So there you go.
I think there you go. Yeah, I think I have seen it. I have seen it in gardens there. So that's great.
Yeah. I mean, the whole of California is like sort of gardening on steroids, basically. Okay. I mean, they just have so many things, different hybridizations, and I found that it was just light years forward when I was there anyway, with the MGS in 2018. That was my impression. They were brilliant.
Yeah. I think they're more forward thinking in terms of lawn, not having so many lawns. We've got a long way to go.
But techniques and plants available, and it's just, I mean, I guess it's a huge market. They just.
Yeah. I think you can get some of those Banksias. I think you can get there as well. That I was showing from this area.
Now, can I now turn to Margot Tobin, who's written in, because she's just down the road from you, and she's saying, Jem, what do your clients ask for, and how do you manage providing something that's sustainable, presumably within the bounds of what they're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, I think every every sort of client, I suppose, is different with that. But we tend to, I suppose, if I tend to try and find the clients that want to do something interesting horticulturally, and probably end up using plants which aren't sort of so readily available. There are some sort of interesting forward-thinking nurseries here which we like to use, and they're doing some interesting stuff. So it's kind of a slight thing of picking the client and maybe leading them the way of doing something more horticulturally interesting rather than just going to get the generic plants. But I think we do have to be careful of not giving people sort of more garden than they bargain for, and try to give things that if they are sort of running and running right, that they're kind of going to look good while they're doing it, if they're not sort of looked after too much. It's quite a different world, I think. In some of our, in a sort of previous life, you quite often have a sort of head gardener or things in these projects, and I think when you're doing people's sort of private houses on a smaller scale, yeah, you've just got to make sure someone's looking after it.
Well, we've got two questions that kind of follow on from that, actually. Firstly, Erica Mayer, I don't know where Erica's based, but asking,
Erica's in Roma.
In Roma, okay.
Yes.
She was asking if you could just say something about the amount of rainfall you get and how much, what is the summer drought? How much time does that occupy?
I think now that's a good question. Sort of quiz my knowledge. I think we get somewhere between 600 and 1,000 millimeters of rainfall. So a reasonable amount, really. I think it's on par with London, but just pretty much all in the wintertime. And then, yeah, so I think the dry months, I mean, it's quite interesting. I was going to include it in there, but actually we have the Aboriginal Noongar people actually have 6 seasons from this area. And if you live here, you actually do notice that there is the sort of traditional 4 seasons are not quite so relevant. So those 6 seasons actually do very accurately sort of divide up the year in terms of the type of weather we're getting. But essentially, yeah, we're getting all of our rain from about now, or just a bit earlier now, to maybe October. Yeah, October. Margot could probably correct me on that one.
So can I just ask what those seasons are called then? I mean, do they have radical?
They do. I've got
what
the.
Do they imply?
Yeah, I can bring up the. I'll bring up the slide actually.
Okay.
Bear with me. I should have predicted that one, shouldn't I?
Well done if you can name all 6 seasons, Jem.
Yeah, that's right. I put myself under pressure here. Let me find my pictures. And they're not coming up. Let's have a look. Okay, well, maybe we can ask the next question, and I can maybe I'll send that in. I could send that in the chat afterwards if that works.
Well, could you in any case send it to Angela so she can circulate it to everybody on email? Because then otherwise we can tend to lose what goes on in the chat.
Oh no, sure, okay.
The follow-up question, which I think is really relates entirely to that, is this is Rosie Byrne, who's in Greece, and she wants to ask what your watering plan is when you're trying to get plants established.
Well, I think there's obviously that is quite a big subject, and I know that there's a lot of thinking on that. The ideally depends on when you're planting it. Obviously, ideally now is the kind of time to be planting. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out like that. So the government official way is that if you put in a new garden, you can kind of get an exemption and water as much as you want, really, for 30 days or 40 days or something. And then you have to sort of revert down to two waterings a week. And typically, even with our lawns and things, we do have a sort of roster of watering, and I think depending on your house number, you have a certain day which you're allowed to water. So that's quite a sort of well-entrenched sort of system that works here. I think that still relies on too much water, but at least it sort of works. So yes, I would say depends on the time of year of watering. One of the nurseries, Zeph's nursery, who's based here, Scott Robinson from there, he's very much just, he'll put it in and he'll give it water for 6 weeks and then he'll let it be on its own. But sometimes that question is a bit difficult if you sort of source some interesting plants and then you don't want them all dying. So as a rule, I think I try to keep it minimal, but it depends on the time of year that we're planting. But certainly through that first year, that first summer, if you're not in the right sort of season. As a rule, I found that people tend to, it's actually quite hard to stop people watering on all these gardens.
And do you install irrigation systems?
Typically we do. It's something that some of those experiments I was showing it is kind of in my own garden, trying to see, how far I can push it in terms of not watering and not having those drip line irrigation. But as a sort of, I think ultimately we're sort of client-led, sort of industry. So it's a sort of bit of a gamble. I've had a few clients which have been pretty brave, and that's kind of worked out. But as a rule, we're pretty much putting in irrigation, and we're just trying to prevent the overuse of it. Yes.
I've just sent Yvonne, if you want to put this up onto the chat, a pretty nice description of the Noongar 6 seasons. There's a link which people can get off the chat if you put it up, Yvonne. I've sent it to you by WhatsApp, and it's from one of the universities over there in Australia, and it says, guided by the land, which is why I think it sounds interesting. So they divide into 2-month blocks. And if you can find it, Yvonne, can you?
I'm just trying to find you. You give me the address. I'm just going through.
Write it down. I think it's fun. It's a new approach. I mean, they're so ancient. Those people, they must know what they're talking about.
That's right. That's right. I think there's that's a huge factor.
Yeah. So I can write it out. It's www.ecu.edu.Australia.
Can you see that on the screen now?
There you go. Yeah, that's nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
I've just taken a screenshot of that.
There you go. I can send you that.
Well, people can take a screenshot too, I think.
Yeah. There you go.
Season of the young, dry and hot. I doubt.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
So yes, February, March are definitely our hottest time of the year, as we're sort of towards the end of summer. And yeah, it's surprisingly, well, not even surprisingly, understandably accurate. But yeah, I think that's interesting that the sort of 4 seasons don't quite work out. Beginning of summer, end of summer, and everything have a very different feel to them. But this is more accurate.
And this only applies to southwestern Australia, does it?
This is, yes. I think, I'm not sure in other words, but yes, this is very much the Noongar calendar. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Okay. So any more comments? So maybe you come back now, Jem.
Yeah.
Your gallery. If people have had time to absorb that. Anything else?
Liz Godfrey is asking, are there any schemes for storing winter rainwater for use in summer?
Yes, I think there's, yes, there are, but not as much as there should be, I would say. And certainly if you're outside of the metropolitan area, I think it's much more common for people to have large rainwater tanks. And that's largely for just sort of the ability to sort of fight fires if that when that comes about as well. So you do get some pretty big rainwater tanks in sort of rural properties. But yeah, it should be more of a factor and more of an element that we have. That's good.
Have you noticed change? I mean, are you experiencing lower rainfalls or more erratic patterns as we are?
We are very much. I think we are at the sort of the predictions are that we will be losing winter rainfall, and we're quite susceptible to that climate change. But yeah, we've had quite a wet sort of winter so far this year. But yeah, I think the predictions very much are that that things are going to change, and so we need to adapt. And that, I think, the sort of the scary side of that is that all of this Banksia woodlands and things that have been here for millions of years, will be in threat of survival for that.
Because of the threat of fire, or because
no, the threat of climate change and the change in rainfall. I think they very much rely, a lot of those native plants, on that winter rainfall. It's probably worth noting, I think another thing that is quite a big factor, which I didn't touch on too much in there, but we have very hydrophobic soils here. So, and particularly on the Swan Coastal Plain where Perth is, very sandy soil. So you can find that water will either just sort of bead off the surface almost, and that has quite a sort of negative. It's something that you have to deal with young plants, because you can also be careful of planting a plant and then watering it, and if you're not doing it properly, you can dig down a little bit and it's completely dry just below the surface. So there is that thing of sort of tanking or creating the sort of Oliver Philippi sort of thing. But I've actually found that we're so sandy, and one of the challenges in doing that is it's almost like trying to do that in a sand dune, and if someone was just to walk through that planting would almost sort of collapse it all down onto the plant. So that's one of the challenges in creating such a big sort of tank around that plant. But I think with that hydrophobia, there's a lot of products that are sold and everything to sort of work against that, and not work or sort of break that down. But it's there's kind of interesting opportunities there. They think it's sort of something that's created to not only prevent water going through, but actually to prevent water being evaporated from the soils in the heat of the year. So kind of working the opposite way around. But that's something that might be explored more in the future.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody in the live? It's not essential that you don't speak.
Hi, I would love to ask a question if I may.
Yeah.
And I apologize if you've answered this because I joined late. So, but I'm struggling. So I have a Mediterranean garden, well researched, every plant. That I planted in Chianti in Tuscany, and I have been fighting for 4 years with my gardeners to not irrigate it. And we laid down irrigation for the first, obviously for the first 2 at a stretch years, but now we're in a drought in Italy, in our part of Italy, and they're like, if you want this garden to die, like I have a whole patch that's Lipia nodiflorum, and as soon as we don't water it, I have to say it does die. And I'm slightly concerned that because we've been irrigating for 4 years now, that the roots have not reached down deep enough, even though they're only getting watered very early in the morning, twice a week. I don't know what to do. I'm quite confused about the whole thing, and things do die if we don't water them.
Yeah, well, I think sorry, Angela. You go.
No, I don't know why I've just interrupted. Excuse me.
No, that's fine. But I think I was going to say, I think from that, a lot of that Oliver Philippi stuff is probably, twice a week is still too much for them to sort of dive down 2 weeks, and maybe they're not getting that sort of water stress and getting used to that sort of element of drought and having to dive the roots down deeper. So even though twice a week in the sort of height of summer is not much, I think there's still quite a big chance that is the roots are not diving deep enough, and they're kind of relying on that sort of amount of water potentially.
Okay.
Rather than
I mean, I water Lipia twice every 14 days. Because that's what it requires. It's every 2 weeks, not twice a week. And that will keep it from dying, and it will keep it green.
But we have once every 14 days.
Yes. Well,
twice a month.
Yeah.
But we've had, uber high heat, like 35 degrees. And last summer, for example, I mean, we're in a drought now, but last summer we had no rain from the end of June, really, until the 1st of September. And
it always is like that. That's what the climate is. I mean, it's not a drought. It's weather. It's what we have. It's our climate.
Well, it is technically a drought. I mean,
it's always like this. I mean,
no, we have a dry pond at the bottom of the hill now that has never been dry, and all the creek beds are dry, and they're dry now, and we have never had that happen.
Oh no, that's because we've not had enough winter rain. But in the summer, everybody else on this call will say the same. That we never have rain in July, August, and June, July, August, most of September, because that's the climate.
Okay, so how would you all advise me instructing? Because we're an agriturismo. I rent it out in the summer, so I'm not there, and I lose control of what's happening in the garden. So what do you advise? What sort of schedule should I put the watering on so that I can sort of wean the garden off of this sort of, nursing that it's had?
I think it's pretty hard for us to without seeing perhaps all of the flower beds and so on.
Do you have any mulch down? Have you mulched over the roots of the plants?
No.
No,
I haven't.
Huge difference, you see.
I mean, I have in the gravel garden, obviously there's gravel. In the other parts of the garden, and it's all the obvious plant. I haven't done anything magnificent. It's Santolina and helichrysum and rosemary and lots of lavender. And I mean that in that particular.
You're watering those?
Yes, they're watering them twice a week when I say don't.
I'm surprised they've not died of mold.
No. It's super hot. It's super hot.
Yeah, but that creates these terrible mold type diseases that you get on the vines. And I'm surprised that they've lived this long. Actually,
no. I mean, it is. We have those. What do you call them? The hoses down where it just leaks out. So it's leaking.
Drip irrigation.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
So it's not like the leaves are getting wet or anything like that. But so in effect, guys, what you're saying is I should take it down to once a week and then
put some mulch on so that when you do water, then that is not evaporating. That would be one way of conserving, and then possibly reduce to once, and if not, never really. No, I understand.
Never, ever.
No, because those plants, technically, they won't die. They shouldn't die. They might not look great. And I understand that might be an issue because you've got a tourist establishment.
Exactly. It is a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. But anyway, perhaps you can follow up with me, and maybe we can talk about some of the resources that are available to give you, or, you know, we could come and have a, since you're in Italy, the Italian branch can come and visit. And
do you know, I was gonna, yes, but that's, I'll write to you about that.
Yeah, that would be great, Lauren. Okay.
We have just been featured in Homes and Gardens, so.
Oh, I'm sure it's magnificent, therefore. Wonderful. So why don't we work on that, and possibly, you know, we can perhaps, you know, be of help and share. Okay. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Great.
Anybody else got anything to say before I close the meeting? I see that we're going slightly long. Okay. Thank you, Jem. What a nice way to spend a little afternoon, just talking across the oceans and the.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It is amazing.
And thank you to everybody for joining us today. And we will return next week to our normal time and our normal day of the month, which is the second Wednesday at 6 p.m. in Rome. Whatever that means for you guys. I kind of gave up of trying to keep in touch with everybody's local time. And thanks from everybody to Jem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Angela, thank you very much for putting the spotlight on Perth. And thanks, Jem.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks all. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jem.
See you next week. I hope you'll join us, Jem. Do you know, if it's not too.
Yes, I will. I have to do the maths, but I'll certainly watch it on. I'll certainly watch it afterwards, if not.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. See you next month.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.